Hello there, and welcome to a new build guide for Age of Wonders 4. This one is a Fury High Culture Inquisition build, and it is a custom order from the Dear and Valued comment section. It utilizes fire magic to a bit, and it utilizes a lot of the high culture roster, and it is a very aggressive and volatile build, which was extremely successful and powerful, which kind of like surprised me because I was first thinking that we're going down the theme road and sacrifice effectiveness, but it works out fine, and I want to introduce it to you. And before I get started, just a quick pointer: if there are any build ideas that you want to see in these videos, or if there's anything that you just can't get to work, let me know. I'll see what I can do. This build has been, as usually, playtested on Brutal, and we're going to get on into the racial and cultural traits first. Overwhelm Tactics is the must-have for the build because extra critical hits upgrade the already powerful early game of the high culture massively, and we opt into that later down the road. Keen-Sighted is synergistic with the high culture because we feature a lot of ranged people, but I gotta say, if you really want to power play towards damage, pick up Sneaky, because you have a good and easy time to make enemies distracted with this build, and therefore flanking damage goes through the roof together with crits. But I felt like for an Inquisition build this was thematically more fitting than sneaky attacks, but feel free to optimize here. And Elusive is one thing that I picked up from the remaining point. I find that very fitting because you have no native shock units, you have no native source of blind, you will always provoke retaliation attacks in general if you don't trick around that, so extra defense against that is pretty nifty, but pretty much all of the 1-point traits are applicable here. The only must-have that I see is Overwhelm Tactics, and the 2-point slot has a lot of yummy options, but Sneaky probably being the most powerful one here. So, cultural traits. It's a little bit of a weird one, isn't it? So here I picked up the powerful evokers first and foremostly because of the massive synergy we got with all our battle mages and supporters. We got a lot of these units in our roster, and they provide more combat casting points. They are also more powerful, and I personally just like to have the ability to be able to cast a lot of spells. We are a buff-heavy culture, we can also nuke, we can do a lot of goodness with our combat casting points, and I find that highly synergistic. The other one that I picked up is Prolific Swarmers. Looks a little bit weird at the first glance, but I implore you to pick up any chaos trait that you find fitting. Here I picked it up due to two reasons. First up, faster city growth, really good for the high culture. We're already good at maintaining strong and powerful cities, and non-magic origin units require less upkeep. This is good for your economy all over the board. There's nothing to sneeze at here. And yeah, the rest is just easy pickings. You can easily replace that, but for this build to properly work out, you need that 1 point of chaos affinity at the beginning. The rest is replaceable. I see runesmiths as a very, very worthy contender here, because we have a ton of unit enchantments in that build running, and it makes them easily accessible. Or I can also see astral traits working that cheapen down your combat castings, or even your summons if you want to rely on these a little bit more. Lots of options here, just bear in mind one chaos trait is a must-have, otherwise the build won't work as intended. Alright, let's move over to the tome section. I had a lot of fun with that one. So we are starting out with the Zeal tome. This was for me a real surprise how powerful it is in the hands of the high culture. Because at first I thought we're just opting into something thematically weak here, but I discovered two things quickly. Legion of Zeal is darned cost-effective. You get a power-up for pretty much all of your roster except for the supporters and the battle mages. And Inspiring Chant is a stupidly effective powerhouse of a thing. It powers up your melees, and it increases your crit rate, and it's dirty cheap. If you go for that extra cheap combat casting trait, you can spam that thing a lot. Go for a Wizard King leader, and you can cast it even double. You have already 20% chance to crit. You put that on your early game roster, and you crit like crazy, and you also power up your unit. This synergy is also very powerful because you have a unit enchantment running for your entire army right from the get-go. Unlike Pyromancy, where you need to enable 2 spells, cast them, research them, here you are online. As soon as you have Legion of Zeal, you're ready to go, everybody's powered up, and that saves you a lot of time. And Inspiring Chant is just bonkers. It's cheap, it's huge, it's powerful. Summon Zealot is a bit of a trap in this build. I wouldn't recommend you to use it much, as you have much better tier 1 units to utilize than these guys. They're just something that I had when I started the game. I started the game with this spell, so don't judge me. I wouldn't recommend them because there's nearly no synergy in this build. But Fanatical Workforce is amazing. If you need something done, this spell gets it done. And I liked it a lot for what it does. Condemnation is also valuable simply because of one reason: you have a lot of beneficial status effects, distraction and slowness and all of a matter of different things, and they just become more powerful if the enemy is condemned. Now, Circle of Zealotry is something I rarely use too much because we already have a lot of draft, but basically it builds into the gameplay of your culture quite well. And Condemn, yeah, free action condemnation, pretty good, no further explanations needed. Second tome to pick up Pyromancy, because we're playing Inquisition, so we need fire, right? And Pyromancy is a real cool tome for this build out of several reasons. First up, Searing Blades and Fury Arrows upgrades your already powerful roster even further. By this point that you have these spells up and running, your units hit like a truck. You're so powerful in the early game once you have them running, it's amazing. Pyromancers are a cheapened down version of your tier 3 battle mages. I like them for what they do. They're available, they do a lot of damage, and they synergize in the rest of your build since you have awakening skills for battle mages. Battle mages can distract enemies, and that's amazing. So the Magma Spirits are also good because if you get them through the cultivation phase, they turn into some really powerful unit, but use these sparingly, as they are much weaker than pretty much everything you got, but they evolve into something useful. We got Ignite and Immolate as useful nuke spells for the battlefield. I don't think you need much explanation about these. They're available, and we have direct damage henceforth. Pretty good stuff. I just want to point on the Ritual Pyre. This is amazing. I underestimated this thing so much. It is another mana income booster, allowing you to stay aggressive on the battlefield with all your buff spells. You can basically spam. You have a lot of mana income with this build. I like it for what it does. Alright, let's move over to the tier 2s. I went here for the Tome of the Inquisition because, you know, we play an Inquisition build, we need the Inquisition after all. There was a real hard thinking process between Beacon and Inquisition, because Beacon is also a pretty interesting choice, but all in all, Inquisition made the race for being the more powerful option. Why so? So, Inquisitor's Mark is making your ranged units, your tier 1s, well, they transform into a debuff battery. There's a lot of different debuffs running, and as soon as Condemnation hits town, it gets even more often that they weaken, that they slow. This adds an interesting facet of utility into your tier 1 ranged units that I really was surprised how good it is. Burden of Guilt is really cool for what it is. If the enemy is attacking you, think of it like that. If the AI comes with a 3-troop doom stack at you, like 3 banners with 6 units each, if you keep the spell running turn by turn, you can isolate one part of their army. There's a lot of shenanigans you can do with this, since it has a very interesting secondary side effect with cutting the move points in half. Not many army spells have so much strategical use like this one. Mass Condemnation, yeah, come on, it's just the same like I said. Softens up the enemy and nukes them a bit. And Tribunal was a surprise hit for me, since we are good at city stability, we gain knowledge per population, we have a lot of food output with what we do already. I love this synergy in that build for the high culture. And the Tithe Collector, yeah, you can just build an extra mine that synergizes with farms and foresters. Nothing to sneeze at either. The Inquisitor, I left him open for the last thing on purpose. is a bit of an odd nut. He's not really synergistic with the high culture, but I discovered them to really love them due to two reasons. First up, nothing is wrong about ranged stun attack that just needs one action and hits like a truck at the same time. And the interesting point about these is skirmishes benefit from weapon enchantments and arrow enchantments at the same time on the melee strike. So you have a lot of oomph behind these guys. It's really advisable to use a couple of them, but don't rely too much on them. They're squishy as hell, but I love to have a ranged stun that also hurts. That's really cool about these guys. And they're also tier 3, so high quality units. The second tier 2 tome to pick up was no auto tome for me. I went for Artificing. A very, very worthy choice would be Revelry, because it does a very similar thing, just differently, but since we were playing an Inquisition build, I wasn't willing to put myself down the demonic road that hard. But I wanted to mention that this one is a really, really worthy alternative to Artificing. But Artificing is not a downgrade. Get me wrong here. We got Artisan Armaments. At that point, your tier 1 and tier 2s turn into real crit machines as we get more and more crit hit chance. This just gets more and more reliable. We gain Siege Magic, allows our battle mages and supporters to deal more damage and also help with sieges, allowing you a very, very aggressive playstyle henceforth at tier 2. Really cool. And Artisan Fortification is a thing that makes your cities just live longer. I like that. And Iron Golems. They are cool. They're stronger tier than your tier 1 shields. So if you want to upgrade your armies, go for it. You finally have a real shield unit, not a paper one. And the bolt repeaters, I rarely use them because you don't want to research everything in the tome, but technically they would help in a siege as well, but not as much as siege magic. So this is one where I'd say feel free to skip it alongside with the fortifications. The fortifications though are cool if you get attacked a lot. And Golem Assistant, I picked this up so much. If all your heroes have that, you have a small army of expendable units that just spawn at the beginning of the fight, and they aren't as weak as they look. 60 HP on a Golem Assistant. Don't underestimate them. They're quite resilient. And status immune, mostly, like all Golems are. Now, tier 3s. Devastation is where we go next. Devastation gives your melee guys explosion skills and, me, more crit chance. At that point, you should really be critting most of the time because it's just in your DNA, basically. And the rest of the spells here are also pretty nice. We got Focus of Devastation, canceling out defense modes via your battle mages, which is really, really cool. Also your supporters, but I ended up, I could see, having a lot of battle mages, and this is a really, really cool thing to have. Warhounds is pretty cool for sieges, because I love to have just expendable units to toss into the enemy, and if you have Golem Assistants, Warhounds, it's really easy to mitigate losses. And Devastator Spheres, yeah, roll in, explode, I like them. Warbreed, not so much. You can use it, don't get me wrong, but it's a shock unit, and it's therefore not so synergistic with your build. Your combat strategy is more like a formation fight. You want to have organized lines and all these things, and shock units just don't play nicely into that. My personal experience, though. And the next tier 3 to pick up will be Sanctuary or Subjugation. I personally root more for Sanctuary because Subjugation is just more on the aggressive side and Sanctuary is more on the defensive side. Choose to your own liking, both tomes work well. Sanctuary is my personal favorite out of several reasons. First off, Anointed People is just really cool because status effect resistance is something I love to accumulate. There's nothing nastier than all those wicked status effects. And this is technically upgrading the tier of your units versus status effects. It turns your tier 1 units way more resistant than they'd ever be, and therefore it's a real power spell. Keeper's Mark is the same. It turns all your frontliners into machines that can't be killed that easily anymore because they turn invulnerable if they die. This is just so annoying to deal with if you are playing against that. It's awesome to have it if you're playing it yourself because your low tier units become a lot harder to kill, so do your high tier units. And Salvation, nice burst heal, stats cleanser, increases resistance, costy as hell. But since we're playing what we're playing, if you use the variant that I'm currently featuring, you don't have to worry too much about your combat spell points. And just have a lot of saving potential. Healing Spires and Consecrated Domain make it super difficult to lose on your own home turf. 20 moral is so much. Don't underestimate how much that is. And Healing Spires, if you have them, 12 Healing Spires, they can all heal on a 16 range. You can win from a disadvantage with these spells alone. Sanctuary is also a amazing conduit spell, providing mana and making it harder for the enemy to pillage, because +2 turns is a lot, giving you a lot of reaction time. And Sanctify, +3/+3. This is a lot of defenses. So if you have somebody who has to take all the heat, this can make even a tier 1 unit fairly tanky. That's why I love this. Subjugation, on the other side, utilizes more the destruction of the enemy's moral. You gain another shock unit. You know me how I think about shock units in this build already. And the rest of the spells, I just didn't find them too synergistic with this build. End of the line. Much more synergistic later will be the tier 4 tomes. This is basically, if you have the Supremacy tome, game over for the enemy. I don't know how you're supposed to lose anymore if your army stack is decent, out of several reasons. First up, Supreme Magic. Congratulations. Now not only your melee dudes explode enemies if they kill somebody, your ranged dudes do so as well. Just take care that you don't let your archers kill anybody anymore, because it's a wasted explosion. I love this synergy. I rarely had a build that had both exploders. It's just, yeah, you know what I mean. Anthem of Victory, that's just more of the same. It's not costy mana-wise, so keep an eye on that. But battlefield-wide, strengthening and moral buff, it's basically the godlike version of the tier 1 and the Zeal. It's basically the massively souped up version of that one. And these two spells alone allow you to dominate the battlefield so massively, but it just gets better from that point on. Supremacy Monuments allow you to churn out units easily. Eagle Riders are the best shield units you can put into your rosters. They're tier 4. And your entire build harmonizes with shield units so darn well. And Condemn Army, yeah, congratulations, you put a weakening spell on the entire enemy army. Good stuff. Exaltation gives you all the major racial transformation fun and more super good things to keep your people alive and burst out more damage that you could wish for. No further explanations needed. So, quick glance over our roster, and that's what I was most happy about with this build, because every part of this roster rocks. Dawn Defenders stay useful throughout the game until you have better shield units. The Defenders and your entire tier 1 roster is very replaceable. The moment you got a better town, another culture that features archers, go for it. You have a spell that allows you to apply your awakening bonuses on everybody else, anyways, in form of dormant enchantment. So just pick up foreign units and replace shields and archers to your own liking, but they are good at what they do. They just die too fast, and their base stats are a little bit lousy. But apart from that, they get their job done until the later stages of the game. Daylight Spears, I love them because they are where a lot of your melee DPS lives at the beginning of the game. Their most powerful trait is that they have more retaliation attacks if they're awakened, and all in all, tier 2 spears hit hard with all the unit enchantments that we got, with all the crits that you got. You will see how hot these guys can hit. And they're also fairly hard to kill with their resistances. Sun Priests are very, very important for your strategy, because they provide a good access to Twin Awakening, which is really important. Put that Twin Awakening always on your ranged units, or whoever wants to smack an enemy. Twin Awaken first, then smack. Twin Awaken after that, smack. It's really good if you get that into your habits, because It's a free action, so you never will lose anything. Mending Awakening awakens the units while healing, so these guys are really good at what they do. And like I said, they can distract enemies the moment they are awakened themselves, so really good stuff. Nothing to sneeze at. The only thing that I didn't like about them was that they provide only a single target heal with a fairly high cooldown. That's a little bit problematic. The Awakeners are your Battle Mage powerhouses. They can sunder enemies' defenses. This spell has a very high range and it can also crit. So I did a lot of hurt with that spell. Spirit Bolts is what it is, a tier 3 ranged attack from a Battle Mage. Nothing to talk about either. And they also have the ability to distract enemies. They are really good nukers, and basically they are the souped up version of the Pyromancers. Pyromancers have a Flame Strike spell. They are very similar to the Awakeners, and you can mix and match accordingly. But if you have to choose and you have the money, always go for the Awakeners, because they have also the ability to awaken other units, which is really important for your build. The more awakening sources you have, the more powerful your build will be. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have already to say about your baseline roster. Replace the tier 1s as you can, as good as you can, because they are the weakest link in your roster. Go for focus these tier 2 units. The Daylight Spears are amazing, and if you can, get yourself a little bit of support help. I personally solved the problem in most scenarios with hero healing spells or hero support skills in form of mass rejuvenation or other sources like the restore skill, or yeah, you know what I mean. The biggest downside, or one of the biggest weaknesses of your build, is that you don't have AoE heals. Therefore, mass rejuvenation is a real big recommendation of mine, because it does help you so massively to get yourself where you need to be over the course of the time, to just get your roster healed up, because you will notice quickly that this build struggles at healing a wide amount of damage. That's your big weakness, AoE splash. But heroes can mitigate that fairly easy, or you just acquire other cultures units. You are, after all, a order and chaos build, allowing you to utilize a lot of these order skills for vassalization. If you run the path that I do, you have a foot in the door with Shadow, allowing you ultimately to even go for the Court of Whispers. If you find another source, this is super good, because then you are able to go into the enemy cities. And another thing that I really enjoyed more than I'd expected it to was Lure of the Horde. You have always a use for your tier 1 and tier 2 units, and free units are surprisingly powerful for the high culture. So Call of Chaos, I didn't use it too much, and I wouldn't recommend it either, because you don't get racial units out of that. And the high culture really loves racial units. Alright, let's move on to the strategy part. We actually entered it already here a bit with the Imperium part, but whatever. This build is volatile right from the get-go. You can, if you have the mana for it, even summon zealots early on to just fill up the ranks. Use that sparingly though, since they are at dead end. But all in all, the combo of Army of Zeal and the what's it called again? The Inspiring Chant is carrying you through a lot. Awaken Inner Radiance, I didn't use that too much because you're busy spamming Inspiring Chant, but if anything goes wrong, make sure to research Warding Blessing as well. It's really, really nice to have that little healing spell that comes on from the side. As usual, your strategy should be to found a second city ASAP. That's really, really important. And you can pretty much decide for yourself how you want to roll it, because you don't have really much downtimes. That's one thing that I really discovered. This build starts strong, gets stronger, stays strong, and dominates if you play it right. I conquered this city here at turn 24, No, at turn 20, 24, it was converted on brutal difficulty. Yeah, I had a lot of losses, but I was able to do the trick with 2 banners of mixed units. So your banners can look something like that. Couple of shields, battle mages, and frontliners. Here I have a supporter in there. This banner should also have a supporter. Personally think 1 supporter per banner, 2 ranged attackers, 3 melees, and a hero are pretty good for this build. You can mix and match accordingly to your own liking. That's one thing that I liked about this build as well. If you have a lot of ranged pressure against yourself, you can rely easily on your frontliners in form of daylight spears and defenders. If you have a lot of melee pressure, you can just seal the front line with defenders and daylight spears in the form of spears at front, defenders at back, spamming their shield stance, and some sun priests in between spamming their defense stance as well, while your backline is just pelting their front line. Or yeah, you just have a lot of versatility here. There's nothing you can't beat. There's only one thing you should pay attention to. Adjust your formation to your enemy. If you notice that the enemy is very, very burst heavy, try to avoid going too much on the ranged side, and vice versa. The big benefit that I found with this build was that it doesn't strain out itself too much on one direction, like only ranged, only crit, only melee. And at the end of the day, I discovered that you can focus into whatever is appropriate, and that's a very, very powerful thing. Like I said, I expected it to be a meme build, but it was surprisingly powerful. And that's where I end for today. So, well, not quite. I just want to point out that you should always pay attention to probable war possibilities. You are really, really best when you're fighting. That was one thing that I wanted to point out. It's very profitable for you to stay fighting because most of your Imperium skills trigger when you're killing something. You are also good for peace times due to the order route, but all in all, I discovered that it's really paying off to have enemies, so piss off the enemy and have some enemies because it's really good to have them. Alright, that's one thing that I wanted to say because of the chaos influence that we got. That's where I am now. So, thanks for watching this. Feel free to leave me your comments down below. Like I said, I take any custom orders for builds. Currently working on a Battle Mage build for the Reavers, but I don't know, what are you up to? I'm really interested what you think. I will explore the new options we have with the Golem update further, and I'd be happy if you'd leave a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and check out Patreon, PayPal, or buy me a coffee down below in the description box. They are the best ways to support this channel, and I'd be delighted if you'd give them a look. A big thanks to all of you who already did, and a even bigger thanks to all of you, or an equally sized thanks to all of you who are still around watching this video even after the ad roll. I hope you had a good time, and I hope we're gonna see each other soon. Bye bye.